Well, for more on NATO's Libya operations, let's speak to Joel Rubin. He's Deputy Director of the National Security Network and a former analyst for the US State Department. Good to have you with us. So we've got the head of the opposition military forces being very critical of NATO, saying they're not giving them what they need, they're not responding quickly enough to requests for airstrikes. What do you make of that?
Well, certainly this is going to take time, and NATO's operations have only been in the last several weeks. We have seen the no-fly zone successfully implemented. We have seen the military advances by Gaddafi stalled. Now is the question of what the forces, the rebels, are doing to prepare themselves to go forward further, and what are they doing in their safe haven in the east. Clearly, frustrations are going to mount, and there will be a need for a continuous reassessment of the military mission with that in mind.
Yeah, but what they're saying is that they can't make ground because of the failure of NATO to help them make ground. Could that criticism now become even stronger, given that the US is pulling its warplanes out of frontline airstrikes?
Well, certainly the advances on the ground right now are being observed from the outside as being stalled. And in the West and here in Washington, many policymakers are saying that it's the rebel forces that are not able to capture new additional territory. A good thing that's happening, of course, is the consultations right now with the transitional leadership to see what is needed. The finger pointing about who is to blame, well, at the end of the day, clearly Gaddafi's forces have deeper resources than the rebels. So this is going to have to be a discussion soon about what type of support can be provided to them. But the airstrikes have achieved the mission that the UN set forward, which was to protect civilians.
But civilians are still in danger. They're still dying in Misrata. So what was it the right move by the US to pull its warplanes out, given that technically the mission hasn't been accomplished yet? Civilians are still dying.
Well, again, the civilians still dying is clearly a problem, but the broader mission of using a no-fly zone to protect against Gaddafi's forces advancing has seen results. And yes, these civilian casualties are something that the NATO alliance and the U.S. is going to have to take very seriously. The AC-130s, attack helicopters of the sort that can be used in closer warfare, if that is needed, then that should be used. But again, the question of whether the rebels shall have NATO as its air force and going further and deeper into this conflict is something that is still very contentious, certainly here in Washington.
One thing that the opposition military forces would like to see is NATO providing advanced long-range weaponry to the rebels. Of course, that's something alliance leaders are very hesitant about, isn't it?
Well, there's a lot of hesitancy because in the past, certainly in Afghanistan in the 90s and in the 80s before that with the Mujahideen, when rebel groups were armed, while expedient at the beginning, was seen to have blowback later on. And so I think that what we're watching is the West and NATO trying to get a better sense of the rebel army, of what their capacities are, who their leaders are, what types of weapons can be helpful, certainly are going to be important, but also how to not go so far as to arm that could have blowback down the road.
Good to talk with you. Thank you very much indeed for that. Joel Rubin from Washington, D.C. there. Well, NATO is also being criticised for not doing enough to protect oil